and welcome to the Fandom Track here at ConTinual. I'm your host, Gail Martin, and tonight we are talking about the Vampire Diaries and its expanded world. But before we get into that, let's let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Anna.
Hi, I'm Anna Puerta. I am a volunteer on the Urban Fantasy track at DragonCon. I am also the assistant director of the Meet track at Multiverse, and I have an MFA in film and television.
Very good. Carol Malcolm.
Yes, and I'm the director of the aforementioned Urban Fantasy track, and we did cover, the Vampire Diaries, the originals, and Legacies on the track because they are indeed urban fantasy. And I did watch the shows from the beginning when they were first on, so it was a good run. They had a long time.
Okay, Violet. You're muted.
I am an urban fantasy writer, and I love Vampire Diaries and all of their spinoffs. They're some of my favorite vampire series.
Okay, Marx.
Hey, I'm Marx Pyle, filmmaker and podcaster and writer, and I came to Vampire Diaries kind of the opposite way than some people probably. I watched Legacies, and kind of remind me a little bit of Buffy in some ways. And then I was like, oh, maybe I should check out this Vampire Diaries. Maybe it's not just a Twilight clone or something. and I'm glad I checked it out.
Sumiko.
Hi, I'm Sumiko Saulson. I'm a horror author, and I'm also the social media manager for the Horror Writers Association. I watched the Vampire Diaries when it originally aired, and the originals. I've pretty much seen them all, and I've been watching the Legacies on a streaming service, so I might have missed a season of that. I don't know.
And I'm Gail Martin, and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. I think everybody knows I'm a huge Supernatural fan, and I would have loved to have seen a crossover, but that might not have worked out well, given what everybody involved would have been doing. So, what attracted you to Vampire Diaries, or wherever you started in its expanded universe? Out of everything you could have watched, what made you pick that? Carol Malcolm?
Well, probably the first thing would be that it had the word vampire in it. That was probably the dead giveaway. And let's face it, every time, I'm always looking for something that is going to be somewhere close, that's something that is Buffy-esque, as Marx was mentioning, and not that the two shows were in any way that much alike. It's not that, but there are certain aspects of it that, you always hope, well, maybe you can catch some of that feeling again. And I think, that was what, that was what attracted me to it.
Okay. Violet.
Well, I personally love paranormal TV in general. I search for it. If I Google and see if I've missed a series somewhere. So I love vampires so much. Even in undergraduate school, I left college with a senior dissertation in vampires. So for me, finding the Vampire Diaries, because I was a fan of Buffy and of course Angel. And when I found those, and I love the originals, that's probably my favorite part of the Vampire Diaries, the original series. And it was just something that I was looking for. And when I caught on to it, I really, really enjoyed it.
Okay, Marx.
So I'm always looking for something Buffy-esque. I also like vampires, of course, too. And so when I saw Legacies commercial, it seemed kind of like Buffy in some ways, and that's probably the one that's closest to Buffy in tone. And I, got hooked on it with the pilot, start watching it, and then it's on, was at the time on Netflix. So I went back and started checking it out. And Vampire Diaries is very different, but I really liked the brother relationship with the Salvatore brothers and some of the plot lines they had going on. It was different than I expected. and I kind of got hooked to it. And yeah, and it's funny because you watch Legacies first, you see the Salvatore house as a school, and then I just
Right.
I watch Vampire Diaries. I'm like, why are you in the school for? It's so weird. You live in the school.
Yeah. It's like, it's a big building, but
It's a
still,
big
why do you
building.
live there?
Yeah.
How about you, Sumiko?
So I like all of those types of paranormal stories. So I think I was watching everyone that came on, like there was Supernatural, there was Grimm. I was bummed out because, Angel wasn't on the air anymore and I needed something with vampires, I think. And also I thought that Damon Salvatore was hot. Honestly, that was a draw for me. So yeah, that probably kept me watching it.
Yep, I'm afraid that there are an awful lot of people who would probably say the same.
Well, it's certainly a start.
No surprise. What's that?
It's certainly a starting point.
Yes, exactly.
Now, when it comes to vampire lore, let's talk a little bit about how the Vampire Diaries and its expanded universe kind of deal with that. Where does it conform to general beliefs about how vampires operate that we all have from watching TV and movies and reading Dracula? And where did it put its own spin on the lore? Violet?
I think they're really traditional North American romanticized vampires. Didn't think they did. I don't think they did much on being original, except for making daylight rings. But everything else, like sunlight and was it Wolfsbane? What was it that they were taking? The plant
Vervain.
that made Vervain, but I think everything else was pretty traditional. And it reminds me a lot of like the Anne Rice vampires, like the transformation, the way they made new vampires. So I think they were typical American vampires. The things that made it interesting to me was the soap opera love triangle drama between Elena and the two brothers. So I think a lot of people got sucked into the storyline just as much as the supernatural aspects of it.
Okay. How about you, Marx?
Yeah, it's not too different from your Western European vampire lore. They got super speed bursts, kind of like True Blood does. I liked the where they build up the mythology over time as you find out more about the origins of vampires and the werewolves and witches and how their different factions like interact with each other and stuff. And the doppelganger aspect and then I really liked it when they got into the originals and that aspect of it. So I do like that. And of course, they cheat with those rings. They don't have to worry about sunlight, but I guess you have to do that. Otherwise, show will be nighttime all the time.
Too expensive to shoot at night all the time.
Yeah, it would be.
Plus, you couldn't go to New Orleans as much. I mean, you wouldn't be able to see as much of New Orleans. Right?
Yeah.
Although if you're going to go anywhere at night, New Orleans is pretty much open all night long.
It's true.
Sumiko.
So yeah, what was already mentioned about the doppelgangers, the daylight rings, the doppelganger stuff got really hard to follow after a while, honestly, but there was there were different people being reborn into different lines and it was kind of complicated. But I also wanted to mention Klaus being a vampire werewolf hybrid. That was also pretty original. Although the vampires and werewolves separately were kind of, typical. Usually when you have vampire werewolf hybrids, they don't do as well as Klaus in most mythologies.
Okay. Anna.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was really interesting the way they use the mythology. I really liked the humanity switch aspect. I mean, I know at a certain point it was a little overused probably, but it was something different that a lot of other vampire shows. I haven't seen that. Like obviously we had Angel that kind of lost his soul, but this sort of having like a switch where you can just turn it off, turn it back on. I thought that was very interesting. But like Marx, I also liked all of the origin story stuff, like how it all came about. I find all that stuff really fascinating.
Okay, Carol.
Yeah, and that the origin stuff we find out actually more, more detail in the originals than we do in some of the other, in some of the other parts of that whole universe. But the whole Ripper aspect I thought was kind of different too, although I guess there are similar things in the lore, but this is what can happen to certain characters or certain vampires. It's not always the one you expect, that kind of thing. That was also one thing that I think that they did, and they managed to, if supernatural doesn't keep you on your toes and keep you guessing, I guess, if it's all just the same all the time, at least to me, it's not quite as interesting. So when you have something thrown out there that, kind of turns everything on its head a little bit, that makes it more intriguing. And they did that pretty well on the show, I think.
Okay. So what about the world building? There were 3 series built out of this idea, these characters, these concepts. What kind of world building was the underpinning for this, and how did it make it believable? How did it create the world that enabled all these things, all these creatures, all these species to survive and interact? Marx?
You mean, like, what is the origin, or?
Well, what about the world building stood out to you, not just in terms of maybe, oh, I've never seen that before, although that's possible, but also, okay, that works. It explains this and this, and it lets them, okay, this works. This enables the story. Or isn't that cool? I never would have thought of that. Any of those things.
Yeah.
Or just, that really made it memorable. I
guess because what they do with the origins, they make it really personal, because you get to know the originals and the doppelganger. I guess they tie a lot of that stuff in with the characters more. It's not like something just happened and doesn't affect them at all, but it does tie into some of the characters. And even with like Legacies, where they have Malivore, I think I'm saying that right. He's tied directly in with Landon and Hope, and he's a major plot tool, if you will, for kind of retconning the franchise, the mythology, and expanding it out. So I guess that's one thing. They make it all feel personal and tie it into character really well.
Okay. Sumiko.
I think that they did a really good job of actually making enough separation, because I think that with stories, and this is what I mean, right? Like with like Buffy, they just had Dawn sort of appear by magic one day, and it kind of made it so that people's like verisimilitude, ability to actually maintain belief that this was really happening, kind of got shut down. But with the originals and Vampire Diaries and the Legacies, they put enough of a gap between the generations so that you didn't have, let me put it this way, like the Legacies, you see them as little tiny kids, but then it's like a whole new story in a whole new TV show, instead of you just kind of having this one magical baby just show up, which is something that I think I've seen in lots of other shows. I think Charm did that too. They had the magic babies. They made like a real, clear separation between the magic babies and these teenagers that are in the show, so that you're not just getting caught up, and the same thing with the originals too. With the originals, they brought in Marcel, and that kind of held your attention in a way so that by the time they brought the other characters back around, you were kind of invested in this whole new world. So they didn't, they made it so that you weren't grieving the earlier characters as much.
Okay. Anna.
I just think the world is so expansive. There's just so many different places to explore. There's so many different little nooks and things that they build out. Like, I mean, even now, Julie Plec has said that they're probably going to have another series out of this world. And like, there could be so many different ways they go with it because there's just so many places in this world. Like you could have something that's like just in like the Hollow, or just in like you could, outside of Mystic Falls, which is, you know, the center of Vampire Diaries, there's just so many different places, and even like realities. Like you could, if you go off of Legacies, like you could have Landon and his new role at the end of that show that I'm not going to say because I don't want to spoil anyone since it just ended. But there's just so many different places, and it's just so expansive. I don't know. I feel like I just said that 5,000 times, but
Okay. Carol.
Yeah, I think that the reason that it worked in the beginning was that they started out with Vampire Diaries starting going essentially, you know, in terms of drawing people in, is that they did set it in a town that was a small town, and yet, you know, what, it wasn't completely isolated. It was not, you know, it wasn't as though they had no contact with the outside world or anything like that, but they gave it that basis of reality, which you need to have for good urban fantasy anyway, you know, that as a place to start, and then introducing these characters that are, well, they're part of the town, just been there a lot longer than most of the rest of the residents, you know, this kind of thing. And I think that starting out that way, you know, really made it, I think it gave it its place and gave it its tone. And then it's really more with the originals when you get to go back, you know, when you get more of the historical flashbacks. You do some in the Vampire Diaries, and it was on for 8 years, so it managed to go longer than, you know, any of the others. But I really think that just, you know, doing that setting, if you don't even talk about the characters, then you know, just bringing the people together, either whether they were the main characters or some of the you know, the secondary characters that you could get attached to, that were whether they were some other type of supernatural being or if they were humans. It was all, you know, it made that mixture, made it work, and provided a good basis for what came after.
Okay. Violet.
I agree. I think it's the element of having a small town where everyone knew each other, and then they bring out these two brothers who had a complicated relationship. And I think it forced you to fall in love with the character and everyone's relationship with each other. Like I said, it was a mini soap opera with a little vampire twist in it. And then when you get to the originals and they actually tell you how they became, I think it put a deeper layer to it for it to expand into a huge universe that will continue to expand and span because there's so many facets that you can take. So I do agree. It's a small town thing. You get so familiar with all the characters, and everyone is worth knowing, and they made you become very familiar with them, and you felt like you were a part of the family.
Okay. So who's your favorite character and why? Sumiko?
My favorite character is Marcel, which is one of the originals. But if I had, I love Marcel. I love everything about him. It's just a great character. But I guess if we're gonna go with the Vampire Diaries, it probably actually is Damon. Yeah, because you know, with Stefan, he always seemed nice, and he turned out to be evil, but his evil was a real kind of cold evil. And I guess that Damon's evil was a real kind of steamy, earthy evil that I liked. So yeah.
Okay, Anna.
Oh,
Vote for evil now. Who's your favorite character and why?
yeah.
Evil.
I mean, Damon's hard to argue against. Damon's pretty great. Enzo is probably one of my favorite characters.
Good character.
That we had. I really loved Enzo. I also really love Klaus's story arc, like just his character arc across all of the shows was really great. But yeah, I think I'll go with Enzo for this one.
Okay, Carol.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're talking, if you're talking about the main three, or at least who were the main three for the first 6 seasons, I would probably choose Damon too, and I'm partly because let's face it, he gets all the best lines, but I think probably, when you go outside of that group, I was a very big fan of Alaric. And, so I was very pleased when, that he was in Legacies, and that like, oh, good, I get to watch this character again, because they do some things to him in Vampire Diaries that I didn't agree with, or not agree with. I'm just a viewer, what do I say? But that I did not appreciate, let's put it that way. And then, to see that he could show up later as this great character was very nice.
Okay, Violet.
In Vampire Diaries, of course, it has to be Damon, but I love him because he was he was the greatest character there. He was just unapologetically himself. All the good of him and all the bad of him. He never pretended. Like Stefan, he annoyed me to no end. Him and Caroline, both of them annoyed me to death. But Damon, I appreciated that he was always honest. He knew who he was, and he never pretended to be anything different. But in the originals, it has to be a tie between Klaus and Marcel. I just love the way Marcel looks. I turn on the TV just to look at him. But
you wouldn't have had to do or say anything, just be there, right?
Didn't have to do anything. I just like to look at Marcel. But Klaus, I like that his character was so angry and loving and complicated and childish. He was such a complicated character. And I really appreciated that. He was walking confusion.
How about you, Marx?
Oh, well, I mean, Damon's great, right? Because he's sort of the bad boy, but also has to redeem himself, his flaws. He's very spikish in some ways. I guess another character, Alaric, like you, Carol, I liked him. I knew him first from Legacies. So when I started watching Vampire Diaries and he came on, I'm like, yeah. And then he kept dying with the Phoenix ring thing. Or I can't remember what it's called. That was funny. I guess another character that maybe didn't get mentioned is Caroline, just because she could have been.
She was great.
She could have been kind of a real simple character or kind of flat type character, but she had a really great arc and grew to be a really great character on the show.
Okay.
Yeah, and she was somebody who was much better. Her character was much better as a vampire than she was as a human.
Yeah.
She was mainly just a mean girl as a human, but once she became a vampire, she was pretty great.
So which character did you love to hate, Anna?
Oh, that's I'll give Klaus that one, because I think he was, awful, just awful at the beginning. Really a terrible, terrible person. But you loved him still. So I think he definitely wins that title for me.
How about you, Carol?
Well, it's hard. It's hard to really hate a character and still be invested in the show, I think. unless, you know, if they have a major role. It's hard to kind of get around that for me anyway. But I will agree that Klaus was he was a tortured soul, but he, gave, gave like 3 times as badly as he, as he took in. It seemed like it, at least for what we saw in the originals. One of the characters I this is not a hate thing, just some of the characters that didn't quite capture me. One of them was Tyler in the Vampire Diaries. I just never really, for him, it was just like, dude, get over yourself. And Matt, even Matt was kind of annoying at times. Matt, he remained a human throughout the show, which was saying something, but there were just some aspects of him that used to annoy me to no end as well. So, neither of them they were secondary characters and you saw them a lot, but so not feeling that invested in them did not take away from the show for me, just because you didn't see them all the time. And you didn't have to deal with the fact that, oh no, oh my God, it's him again. I don't want to look at you.
Okay, how about you, Violet?
Probably Stefan. Stefan annoyed me. He was just so whiny. He just was so whiny and always conflicted, and he didn't know if he wanted to bite a rat or bite a person. He was always suffering. He reminds me of like Louis in the Interview with the Vampires. He just drink blood or die, run into the sun, take off the ring, or just be quiet. So that's the way I felt about Stefan.
I don't know if that's love to hate or just hate to hate.
Yeah, right.
How about you, Marx?
Yeah, those two are kind of like Angel and Spike in some ways. Angel's always so mopey too.
Yeah.
But I forget who said it, but Klaus, I think, is my favorite character to hate at times. Like, he's pretty evil. He's been very evil at times, but he's also got a lot of layers to him too. And,
right.
And gave us hope. So the character hope.
I forgot about somebody, guys. Oh my gosh. Kai. I was obsessed with Kai, but he was terrible.
Oh, well, yeah, I was going to say that because he was more of a guest. I mean, he was there, he wasn't there.
Still, if they brought back Kai at any point, I would have been like so there for it. I just
I agree.
Every single time he was on the screen. I mean, he was awful, but he was amazing, the actor, and performance wise, I loved him.
And went all out. He did not care. I mean, he was just so in that space. Yeah, I was very glad to see when he turned up in Supergirl, but not the character, the actor. Anyway,
yeah,
I digress.
Me too.
How about you, Sumiko?
I would say Klaus, but actually he had his moments. There was something almost wholesome about his relationship with Marcel in parts that made me really like him. And then he would be a complete jerk at other parts, and I know why people are saying him. But I want to say Katherine. I was just like, where's Elena? Can you just go away already? As an evil.
You got
I did not like her. I didn't find her charming or anything. Like, Klaus was evil, but then he was kind of charming. And just Katherine, I was like, okay, they're both into you. I don't really get it. I don't see why. But whatever. I did not like, not a fan. So, yeah.
So if you had to pitch the series, the world, to somebody who'd never watched it in a couple of sentences, how would you convince them that they really needed to watch this series? Carol?
Okay, well, I will say 2 things that had stood out to me about it. One is that to me, the Vampire Diaries itself, if you like supernatural, the fraught relationship between Sam and Dean, they've got nothing on compared to the Salvatore. Sorry, but it's true. and the other thing is that and this is probably not a very good pitch, but for me, one aspect, the romance trope that I despise above all others is the romantic triangle. I have no patience for it. I just don't get it. That show had the only one I've ever found to be believable. So if people are into that kind of thing, then then they might enjoy that show. But really, the show is about the two brothers. When it comes down to it, that's what it's about. And there are a lot of other things that intercede, but if you like Supernatural, you will like that, probably.
Okay. Violet, how would you pitch it?
Vampire brothers fighting over the same girl. That's the entire storyline. And you just add in the best friend witches and the classmate werewolves, but it's still just about those brothers and that girl.
Very good. Marx.
Same thing, but no sparkling. How about that?
No sparkling.
No sparkling.
What do you think, Sumiko?
I think it's this great vampire soap opera, like a modern Dark Shadows.
Fair enough.
That's a good idea. Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Anna.
I think the first question I would ask is, how much time do you have? And then I would follow that up with,
you got 17 years to spend. Okay, go for
right.
it.
I would like Buffy meets Supernatural meets I don't know. Maybe it's just Buffy meets Supernatural. You know.
Fair enough. Well, folks, believe it or not, we've really gone through our time. So before we wrap up here, let's have everybody say where we can find you online, starting with Violet.
You can find me on violetmeier.com. I'm also Violet Meier on all social media outlets.
Okay. Marx.
Yeah, my main hub online is marxpyle.com. You can also find the podcast at genretainment.com and some of the books, the anthologies I've been working on at cabotcrossing.com. And I'm over on Twitter at Mr. Marx.
Very good. Sumiko.
SumikoSaulson.com, and it's Sumiko SKA on most of the social medias.
Cool. Carol?
Yes, go to Facebook, plug in DragonCon Urban Fantasy, and that's where you'll find the track. And then if you go to YouTube and do that, you'll find our channel, which has lots and lots of content on it. I should know the number of videos that were, different things that we have on there right off the top of my head, but I don't. But I want to say it's probably close to 40. That are Supernatural rewind panels, other media panel or show content, and then also author interviews. And if you just put in DragonCon Urban Fantasy, there we are.
Very nice. Anna.
I'm on Twitter at Anna K Pants. So that's where I'm at.
And I'm pretty easy to find at gailcmartin.com, morganbryce.com. But most of the time, you can find me here on ConTinual. Well, thank you all so much for a terrific discussion on Vampire Diaries. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There will be more fandom coming up on ConTinual. So we'll see you online.